Hi, my name is Scott, and I needed to complete a keyboard tray for a desk that I recently finished, and so I thought this would be a fun project to use some of my Festool tools and demonstrate a couple of techniques. Now it's a pretty simple project. It's just a tray with a front edge attached to it, but what I did to add a little bit of a challenge and a little bit of a decorative element is I decided to make a sliding dovetail on the tray itself to secure this front banding. I don't know if this is going to come up in the camera or not, but the male part of the joint was cut on the tray itself using the OF1010 and the edging accessories, and that's something I hadn't done before, so I wanted to give that a try. I also used the edging plate to level the front banding to the top of the tray itself, and it worked out great. So those are a couple of techniques that I wanted to try, and of course I used several of my other Festool tools to complete this project, but hopefully you'll pick up a couple of tips that you might be able to utilize, and I hope you enjoy the video. Thanks so much. The first step is to establish a straight edge along the board. I've got my saw set up with the proper depth to account for the guide rail. I'm just going to make a rip cut. The front edge of the tray is about 1.25 inches, 32 millimeters. I've just taken a line and measured that distance from the freshly cut edge, and I'll go ahead and rip this piece. I decided to attach the front edge of the tray using a sliding dovetail, partly just because I wanted to try a new technique. You could easily domino this on the front edge. That would be just as effective, but I wanted a little bit of a joinery detail on the edge, and I wanted to be able to try out my new edge trimming accessories to cut the male slot. So here's the setup. I've got some scrap pieces to support the router as it makes the cut. This is a 1.25 inch thin strip, and I've also put some double stick tape down to secure the thin edge. In hindsight, I probably should have cut the groove with the router first when the piece was bigger and then ripped off the proper section, but this will work. It's secure. And I've got the depth set on my router already with the dovetail bit. Double check the groove to make sure the offset is right and I have the groove centered in the right place, and I'll go ahead and make the cut. The groove came out pretty good. I cut the pieces a little bit longer than they need to be just to account for any chip out that might happen on the ends, and to allow me to trim everything square and flush once it's assembled. So now I'm going to set up to cut the male part of the joint using the edging plate. Okay, I'm ready to attach the edging plate and the accessories. This can be kind of confusing to set it all up, to figure out how all these parts come together. Festool does provide a little diagram that helps, but I thought I'd just take a second to show you. So what I like to do is just flip the router upside down so the handle on the front, the knob here, points to the left, and this little chip guard fits on the exterior of the base. You'll notice this is a little recess cut in here, and that actually lines up with the dust extraction port on the inside of the router, and this little plastic piece fits inside the place where the bit goes, and then the edge is contoured to fit the edge of the router, so it just pops right on there. I'd get it lined up, and then there's a little clamp with a knob that you can tighten up to secure the chip guard to the edge of the router. And then this arm actually can move up or down depending on what size bit you're using and how far down the plunge is. So I have my bit height set, and one thing when you're making the male end of the dovetail joint using this method is you don't have to adjust the depth at all. The shoulder of the cut is already set when you did the female part of the joint. So I've got the plunge locked down so I know how far the bit's going to protrude, and then that allows me to set the height of the chip catcher. The rest of the assembly consists of an angle arm and then the edging plate itself. And there's this shaft that fits inside this hole on the angle arm. And then you screw that on with the depth adjustment knob. And this allows you to set precise depth. Once you have the router on the side, you can set the depth of the router up or down using this knob very precisely, and then it locks into place with this knob here. And then this knob and piece fits in the slot on the side of the router. This is normally where the foot plate goes. So you take that out, and then this fits inside that slot. You can tighten it down, and then you can actually raise and lower this to accommodate how much of a workpiece you have on the flat. So I'll just make one cut on one side, flip the board, and then make it on the other side, and the groove and the dovetail should be perfectly centered on edge and fit nicely in the slot that I cut on the front edge. Flip it over, make the cut on the next edge. It's a tight fit, as it should be. I'll just put a little bit of glue on the female slot, maybe about a third or halfway down, just enough to give it a little bit of lubrication and a little bit of glue. Once this is on here, it's not going to go anywhere. The glue is now dry. And when I cut the female groove on the front edge, I cut it in so that the top of the edge sits a little proud of the tray itself. Now I could sand this flush and it would probably work out okay, but since I already have the edging plate installed, I decided to install a spiral bit in the router, and I'm going to trim the top of the front edge so that it's flush with the top of the tray. Depth of cut adjusted so that it's flush with the front of the edge, and I'll go ahead and make that cut. The edging plate worked great. The banding's now perfectly flush with the top of the tray, and this knob really allows you to dial in the proper depth of cut so that you're perfectly flush with the edge. A lot faster and a lot easier than sanding the top edge to be flush with the surface. Ready to trim the edges square on each side, and I'm going to use the Capex to do that. I'm ready to ease the top edges of the tray, and I'm going to use a Festool 4mm bit to give it a nice round over profile. I'm going to use a combination of sanders. I decided to use my Rotex 150 just because the 5mm stroke will go a little bit faster, and I think it'll work out well. And I'm also going to use the DTS 400 to get along this edge, and also the very small edge here. And that should work out pretty well. The DTS 400 is a great little sander, and you'll notice that I was able to get right up on the edge of the trim piece as well as on the shelf, and the sander doesn't bounce around as it hits the edge, so you can sand right up to the edge, which is really nice.